Hello, Archie Dunlop here with Talking Astrology with Archie. And in this video, I'm going to be looking at the weekend of September the 21st and 22nd, 2024. So it's actually quite a busy weekend. We have a Grand Trine. We have the Moon and Uranus in Taurus making a conjunction, and we've got Pluto in Capricorn, and we've got the Sun in Virgo, and they're forming this triangular relationship. And we also have an opposition between the Sun and Neptune. And this is really what I want to focus on at the end of this video, because I think the Sun opposition Neptune is important, and I want to try to understand what it means to have the Sun opposition Neptune. I'm going to be looking at a few events where the Sun was opposition Neptune, and also looking at some famous people who have the Sun opposition Neptune, so perhaps we can get an idea about what this aspect means. But first of all, I want to look at the astrology and the I Ching of this weekend. Now, just a reminder, if you happen to like this video, then I'd be really grateful if you were to indicate that you really did like it. And if you're not subscribed, I would be super grateful if you were to subscribe. I mean, of course, only subscribe if you enjoy the video. Just don't just subscribe to be nice. But it does make a difference to the channel, I believe, if I do get subscribers. I think I'm on 6,700 subscribers, something like that, and I suppose my next target is 10,000. It does seem a long way away, and I suppose the sooner I get to 10,000, I suppose the happier I'll be. Anyway, so let's look at the horoscope for the weekend. So here is a horoscope. Here's a chart for the weekend. Actually, that is a chart for the Cultural Revolution. I didn't really want to look at the Cultural Revolution right now in China. Actually, I wanted to look at the weekend. There it is, September the 22nd, 2024. I've set it for New York, right in the middle of the weekend, at midnight on Sunday, September the 22nd. So the first thing we notice is that the moon is in late Taurus. In fact, it's on conjunct Algol. We have a Moon-Uranus conjunction. Conjunct Algol, remember that fixed star Algol, the head of the demon, often associated with evil, things going wrong, disastrous events. So we do have that. I'm not saying there are going to be disastrous events, but we do have to consider that possibility. Moon is actually quite well placed in Taurus, apart from being conjunct Algol, and the Moon is exalted in Taurus. It is very grounded, supposedly, in Taurus, and that is the position for midnight, sort of New York time. In fact, from a sort of London perspective, then we find that the moon moves into Gemini at 11:24 a.m. on Sunday morning. So if you're in the Americas, the moon will move into Gemini fairly early on Sunday, early in the morning. And so really, if you're in the Americas, you can probably regard it as being Saturday, but regard Saturday as being a moon in Taurus day and Sunday as being a moon in Gemini day. If you're in Europe or in Africa, then I suppose you could say that moon in Taurus up until around lunchtime, early lunchtime on Sunday, and then the last half of Sunday you get the moon in Gemini. So there is a changeover at some stage this weekend. Now that changeover won't really happen if you're in Australia or New Zealand, maybe late on, perhaps depending on time zone, perhaps very late on Sunday. But I think if you are in Australia or New Zealand, or perhaps East Asia, the Philippines, Japan. You can probably regard the whole weekend as being a Moon in Taurus affair. So that transition from Moon in Taurus to Moon in Gemini it's quite an important changeover. You know, Moon in Taurus, we've got a lot of Earth, a lot of stuff in Earth signs, and we've got this Grand Trine in Earth, which I'll be talking about in a moment. And then suddenly the Moon moves into Gemini, and that is a change. There appears to be more variety, more flexibility, perhaps more things to talk about, and perhaps we've been very focused on one thing, and then suddenly we're focused on two things, and there's a bit of lightness entering into the proceedings. Now, this Moon in Taurus, so the Moon, I talked about the Moon making a conjunction to Uranus, and sort of Moon conjunct Uranus can be a little bit unstable. So that could be about Saturday, maybe late on Saturday into Sunday. Things could be a bit difficult. Things might happen that we simply weren't expecting. But the key point is we now get a super Grand Trine now. I mean, I talked about a Grand Trine a day or two ago, and the fact we do have a Grand Trine in Earth signs, but involving the Sun, Uranus and Pluto. Now we throw the Moon into the equation as well. So we've got Moon conjunct Uranus, trine the Sun, trine Pluto. So that is a lot of energy. And I suppose because it's a Grand Trine in Earth signs, it's about things moving. It's about matter. It may be about, I suppose, ideas about matter, perhaps about money and material things, and things can change quickly. Structures can change quickly. Something exists one day, and the next day it doesn't exist. I mean, that might be how the Grand Trine in Earth signs functions, and it is easy, I suppose, for people to fly off the handle. Moon conjunct Uranus in Taurus, really stubborn, not prepared to compromise. And this Moon conjunct Taurus, I don't know. There's a lot happening in the Middle East now. I haven't really talked about it. This pager explosion with Israel sending all these arranging for these pagers to be picked up by Hezbollah or used by Hezbollah in Lebanon, and them exploding simultaneously. And of course, Hezbollah have made all sorts of threats. I think they claim to have hit, or news just said they've fired 140 missiles at Israel. And, one wonders about the weekend. I suppose you could say, well, Israel is a Taurean country, and one might ask, how is this, Moon-Uranus conjunction going to impact Israel? Let me just actually quickly have a very quick look at Israel's chart, just to show you what I mean. There's Israel's chart. You can see that Israel does have its sun in Taurus. So 23 Taurus. Okay, this Grand Trine does not exactly hit 23 Taurus, although we do have Mercury and true Black Moon Lilith making a trine to Israel's sun. But yeah, that moon conjunct Uranus is a few degrees off, but it may have an impact on Israel. So that might be one part of the world that we perhaps need to be looking at. Other things going on. It is, of course, the equinox this weekend. So London time, the equinox is at 1:45 in the afternoon on Sunday. There you can see the sun is right on the edge. It's just about to move from Virgo into Libra. So in fact, we get the lights, the sun and the moon, moving from Earth signs into air signs over the weekend. It's not just the moon moving into Gemini, but we've got the sun moving into Libra, and so that is that is certainly a big change, and perhaps the world will change when the sun moves into Libra. It's just a very different energy, and when you've got the sun moving onto a cardinal point, i.e. 0 degrees Libra, that can be quite a big event. Now, another thing happening or starting to happen, which actually doesn't happen over the weekend, but you need to be aware of, is look at Venus. Venus is at 2851 Libra. In other words, Venus is getting ready to change signs. It's getting ready to change signs from Libra into Scorpio. And that is a huge change. I've been trying to signal this over the last week, that Venus is really strong in Libra. And it's in its own sign. It's in mutual reception to Saturn, and by exaltation, it was in a trine to Jupiter. Now it's moving into Scorpio, the sign of its detriment. That is a massive changeover that I think is, all things being equal, is not going to be particularly positive. Venus moves from being the strongest planet in the sky to arguably the weakest planet. So, that might have many implications. One implication that I hypothesize that it might have an impact on the Democrat Party, because and Kamala Harris. I think that mainstream media is certainly saying how the Democrats are leading in the polls. It's looking good for the Democrats if you watch the mainstream media. But I do associate that Venus in Libra, mutual reception to Saturn, with the Democrats doing well and with Kamala doing well. And I think that with Venus moving into Scorpio, I don't think that things are going to be quite so easy. But I'll be talking about that probably in a video on Monday. I'm not sure. So that's a picture for New York at midnight, halfway through the weekend. Just wanted to quickly show you the picture in Sydney, Australia. The reason I do Sydney, I look at Sydney, Australia as well, is firstly because I have quite a few people watching this video from Australia, and secondly, it just demonstrates that there is a problem with doing daily astrology, in that there can be substantial differences in the positions of the planets from one place to another. And New York and Sydney, Australia are on completely different time zones. I mean, really very, very far apart. And so if you look at Sydney, Australia, at midnight, halfway through the weekend, the moon is at 17 Taurus. So if we looked at New York, it's at 26 Taurus. So, in a way, from the perspective of Sydney, Australia, halfway through the weekend, the moon is still actually halfway through Taurus. It's not really even coming to the end of Taurus. And I suppose, this reminds us that, all this stuff I was talking about the moon moving into Gemini. Well, if you're in Sydney, Australia, then the moon doesn't really move into Gemini, until perhaps very late on Sunday. Of course, it's not just Sydney, Australia; it's that whole region, Australia, New Zealand, East Asia. So it is slightly different, and possibly if you're in Australia or New Zealand or East Asia, there's just more emphasis on the moon in Taurus, perhaps more emphasis on that moon conjunct Uranus. But that moon conjunct Uranus does seem to really sort of dominate the weekend, and it seems to perhaps be more the main aspect of the weekend. But I don't think there's a huge difference if you just focus on Saturday. But so if you are in Australia or New Zealand, or when I talk about the moon moving into Gemini, it doesn't really apply to you unless you're going to be up really very late on Sunday. Now, turning to the heliocentric picture very quickly, if we put the sun at the center of the solar system where it should be, we get a chart like this. And here's a heliocentric picture for the weekend. So the thing to notice is that, we've got Sun opposition Neptune this weekend, particularly at the beginning of a weekend. And from a heliocentric point of view, that shows up as Earth conjunct Neptune. So it's the same thing. So Earth conjunct Neptune, we've got Neptune sextile Mars, and we've really got Earth sextile Mars as well. And so it is perhaps a somewhat deceptive weekend heliocentrically. It is difficult to know what's going on, what people are doing. And with Mars sextile Neptune, Mars is a planet of assertion, of perhaps of warfare, and people doing things behind people's backs, because it is a sextile. We think about it as a nice aspect, but it's just an aspect. That's perhaps how we should see it, particularly in a heliocentric sense. I just feel that heliocentric aspects are pretty neutral. Trine could be good, could be bad, depends on the situation. And so Mars sextile Neptune, just doing things in a kind of a sideways kind of way. And we might find that things happen that we don't really notice. And also look at Mercury. Mercury's gone into heliocentric Virgo, but Mercury does make a square to Mars. Okay, the Mercury-Mars aspect is kind of separating, but I would have said to an extent it's still there. So that could be about harsh words. So I suppose we have to be careful what we say and not be upset by what other people say. And Venus opposition Jupiter, it's past peak, but we may still feel its influence. Venus opposition Jupiter can be excessive, can be expending too much emotion, getting too caught up in our emotions, or perhaps it could be about spending money, or just perhaps behaving in a somewhat excessive way. So that's a heliocentric chart, and I now want to look at the weekend from the perspective of the 12 signs. So these are my forecasts for the 12 signs for the weekend of September the 21st and 22nd, 2024. Aries. So Aries, on Saturday, I would have said that you probably want to do things in a particular way. I don't think you want to do anything that is especially dramatic. You understand that there are certain things you want to attend to, and on your travels you might see that some things are not entirely right, and you might want to fix them. And if you have the chance, Aries, it might be a good idea to focus on financial stuff, particularly on Saturday, because on Saturday we've got the moon is in Taurus, and the moon is kind of making a sextile to Mars. It's a very wide sextile to Mars, but early on Saturday then there might be things you can do that could be financially useful. Maybe there's something that needs to be expressed, sorted out. And perhaps people haven't been entirely honest about something, and you can perhaps bring things out into the open. And I suppose if you wanted to make the absolute most of the weekend, Aries, then I would probably say that you should have a long, hard think about what you are actually good at. Because Aries can move this way, that way. There can be a lot of movement in the Aries world. And I understand you are calming down a bit, but still there are things you'd like to do, and you might think there are lots of different things you want to do, but perhaps you should be a little more focused, because there is something you can do really well over the weekend, and it's probably just one thing. One thing you can do especially well, better than other people, something that you'll be really appreciated for. And so that's what you should maybe concentrating on. But the appreciation doesn't actually matter. The key thing is that you're doing something that you feel, not just that you're good at, that you just feel very comfortable with. And I think if you throw all your energy into it in actually quite a single-minded way, you may certainly be able to surprise yourself. Yeah, if people appreciate it, that would be great. If people don't appreciate it, well, does that really matter? Now, the moon does change sign over the weekend. It does, as I've already explained, it does to an extent depend on your time zone. But the moon moving from Taurus to Gemini on Sunday does, I think, create a certain change of emphasis. I think the moon, when it moves into Gemini is arguably a more Aries-friendly sign from Taurus. Gemini is a positive sign. The positive signs are, of course, the fire signs and the air signs. And Aries and Gemini, there's no battle, not much battle between Aries and Gemini. And Aries and Gemini, they do complement each other quite well as signs. And it's a long time since I've had much to do with an Aries, but in a distant past, when I had contacts with Aries people, it seemed to, by and large, work out okay. And so with the moon moving into Gemini, there's a bit of sort of mental action, a bit of thought and communication, and you can perhaps start to think things through. It's not all about action. In fact, if you look at the overall planetary picture, there are really no planets in fire signs at the moment. None, unless you count Chiron in Aries or the North Node in Aries. There's not much fire around. So if you want excitement, in many respects you're going to have to perhaps rely on mental excitement, and perhaps what you need is mental excitement. And so towards the end of the weekend, as the moon moves into Gemini, ideas will be starting to form. Now, you might not have the impetus and the spark to make these ideas actually happen. But that's okay. You can have an idea, you can work on an idea, you can talk about an idea, and then at a later stage you can work out what to do with it and what actual action is required. Taurus. Certainly the beginning of a weekend, there is quite a big emphasis in Taurus. And in fact, if you're in Australia or New Zealand, basically the whole weekend the moon is in Taurus. So Taurus, to an extent, the focus is on you. The moon is in Taurus. The moon is making a conjunction to Uranus in Taurus. And I think Taurus, you may feel you want to stir things up. You're just not entirely happy with the way things are, and it would be better if things were done differently. You might take the view it would be better if people did things your way. Now, you don't want to be too stubborn about it, but I suppose you do need to consider the possibility that your way is the best way. Of course, you probably think your way is the best way anyway, and a bit of objectivity might be useful, but still, through your stubborn, single-minded approach, you can certainly have a huge impact. And that moon conjunct Uranus is really going to help. And that moon conjunct Uranus is part of a wider Grand Trine formation. So the sun is in late Virgo, the moon is making a trine to the sun, the moon is making a trine to Pluto. So Taurus, if you want to change things round, then now is your chance. Sometimes with Taurians, they can be a little bit, they can get a little bit stuck and angry. They want to create change, they want to say something, but they miss their moment, and then they get very frustrated and angry, and they might blame other people and so forth. That's not something you need to allow to happen. You can seize the moment, and so there's no need to be frustrated. There's no need to feel that you've missed the moment, because I think right now, Taurus, you do understand the moment, and it's important not to underestimate your power, and also not to underestimate your individuality, because you really are an individual. You do things your way, and by and large, Taurians are not people who compromise. Compromise is not really part of your thing. That's not what you do, and so that individual stance of yours, which you don't compromise, is going to be really strong, and you shouldn't feel that you need to necessarily make a big fuss about it. Sometimes Taurians can do that. They can make a fuss because they feel they really have to make a point, but you don't have to make a point. The only person you have to make a point to is arguably you yourself. And Taurians, as I said, yesterday, they are people who can create change, and they can create, in some respects, they can create violent change, but it's unnecessary to create violent change. Sure. And as I mentioned, Maximilien Robespierre, one of the architects of the French Revolution, had his son in Taurus. So did, I think, Pol Pot, the Cambodian dictator, and clearly not a very nice person, but still, I suppose he had an idea, and he put it into practice, and so. Of course, everyone suffered from that, but that is a concept, perhaps, of Taurus the revolutionary. And we do have Moon conjunct Uranus in Taurus, so perhaps you need to tune into your inner revolution, but you have to also consider who is going to suffer or benefit from the inner revolution if you try to push that revolution outside onto the rest of the world. But maybe you shouldn't project. Maybe the revolution starts at home. The revolution starts with you, and the big struggle, I think this is a big struggle for everyone, isn't it? It's easier to change the world than it is to change ourselves. I think that is true to an extent. We can change our world, we can be a dictator, millions of people may benefit or suffer because of our actions, but what about us? We're the same person all the way through, and I suppose maybe people like Robespierre and Pol Pot, the reason they put so much effort into restructuring the society around them is perhaps because they find it difficult to change themselves. Because if they were able to change themselves, if they were able to bring some kind of personal transformation on themselves, they wouldn't feel the need so much to overturn the society around them. So perhaps with the Moon conjunct Uranus in Taurus, trine the Sun, trine Pluto, you should have mercy on society and start to focus on your own changes. Then later on you can think about other people and how they should be changing. But I think to a great extent transformation begins at home. Now, just a reminder, Taurus, that Venus, which is your ruler, is now in very late Libra. It's moving into the last degree of Libra. It's getting ready to move into Scorpio. Now, that might mean that you do feel that you're on the cusp of something, that something is about to change. And I think that the nature of your luck might be about to change. Venus is kind of well placed in Libra, as I've already said, and it is moving into Scorpio, where it is not so well placed. But Scorpio is also an important sign for you. It is your opposite sign. It does say something about relationships and your relationship to other people, and how you are going to relate to the people around you. And so perhaps look at the relationships you're involved in, consider how they may be about to change with Venus changing signs. So don't ignore that. And also I should point out that Venus is making a square to Pluto. Venus towards the end of the weekend, with this Venus square Pluto, you do get a sense of transformation, but this is perhaps more on sort of an emotional level, and it may have some impact on other people, on relationships. You may find yourself becoming a little more intense than usual, maybe a little more passionate than usual, but it's at the same time something that you are inclined to sort of keep to yourself with this Venus square Pluto. It's maybe not for public consumption, or at least people can't see what's going on. And so I suppose what this means, Taurus, is you do have to take things seriously. There is a change happening, Venus moving from Libra to Scorpio. As it makes a change, makes that square to Pluto, and it is quite dramatic, and it is quite intense. So I suppose overall with this weekend, just err on the side of seriousness. I mean, I think you can be creative, you can enjoy yourself, but in terms of the enjoyment, there are limits to that. There comes a point where you start to take things very seriously, as Taurians do. Taurians are a serious sign, and they don't like triviality. They don't like joking around, at least if it goes beyond a certain limit. So I suppose take yourself seriously, and then I suppose everyone else will take you seriously, and things will be fine. Gemini, the moon eventually moves into your sign this weekend, but particularly on Saturday, the moon is moving through Taurus, and so perhaps you might experience Saturday and Sunday as being rather different days. On Saturday, you may feel that you want to perhaps keep a relatively low profile. You feel that you don't really want to engage. I mean, just not for the sake of it. You just feel that it might be better off if you were to do things your way, and not have to worry too much about what other people are thinking and doing. And if you do that, I think you'll feel comfortable. And also you've got to consider other people's sensibilities. If on Saturday you were to spend a lot of time socializing, if you were, try to talk to as many people as possible, go to parties, that kind of thing, I'm not convinced that you'd actually be a particularly fun person to have around. I think that at the moment, Gemini, there is a seriousness to you. There are perhaps things you're preoccupied with, and you don't entirely want to discuss them. And I think that other people may feel that you are holding something back, and therefore, I think you should probably just accept the situation. And maybe on a private level, there are things you're working on. There are things changing, things happening, and You perhaps just need to work it all out in your own way. Then on Sunday, there is a change. The moon does move into Gemini. Now, quite when the moon moves into Gemini, it does depend on your time zone. 1:45 in the afternoon, approximately. 11:24 in the morning if you're in London. Very early in the morning if you're in the Americas, and if you're in Australia or New Zealand, well, very late on Sunday, maybe too late. Maybe if the moon and Gemini experience will be something more about Monday, but by and large, for most of us, the moon does move into Gemini on Sunday, and we can feel that movement. And I think that we will become more optimistic, more positive, and I think that we'll find it just easier to relate. And this links with the equinox. So the equinox, well, London time is at 1:45 in the afternoon. So the equinox is about two planets, the sun and the moon, changing sign from earth signs into air signs. And you're going to really pick up on that. You suddenly feel this blast of sort of energy and togetherness, and it may be that you start the weekend feeling completely out of sync. Certainly, I don't know, I'm feeling out of sync. I'm recording this on Friday. I feel out of sync, to be honest. I really do feel out of sync. Of course, I have my sun in Gemini. I don't feel I'm fully connected with what is going on around me, with the events going on. I don't feel in sync at all. And sort of I'm hoping that, I'm going to feel more in sync by Sunday. But, when the sun moves into an air sign, when the moon moves into Gemini, I'll be able to understand what's going on better. I mean, I'm seeing little glimpses of my truth, maybe, but it's only glimpses. I feel right now that the world is passing me by. And maybe as a Gemini, that's what you're feeling as well. But of course, I don't want to project my feelings onto you. There's always that danger of projection. But I'm putting that forward, this idea of being out of sync as a possibility. And I do think that during the first half of the weekend on Saturday, you will feel out of sync, which is another good reason not to be spending too much time in other people's company. But then on Sunday, you're feeling that finally things are starting to make sense, that you're in tune with things all over again, and you can start thinking about, what needs to be done, what you would like to be doing. And I think that you will have a great sense of your own abilities and your own talents, and you'll perhaps feel in a way that people are interested in you again. Maybe you felt recently that they weren't particularly interested in you. Maybe your view was just too unique, perhaps too outrageous, or you just didn't want to talk about it anyway. But you can start to interact all over again. And so I do think that is something that is fortunate for you. And at the same time, one thing I should have pointed out is that, Mercury, heliocentrically, Mercury is square Mars. And that Mercury square Mars, by the way, was more of a feature of Saturday. So Mercury square Mars heliocentrically can be about anger, verbal anger. Yet another reason why on Saturday you should be trying to keep yourself to yourself. Again, by Sunday, I think that Mercury square Mars is starting to break up. And so it's not it's not so much of an issue. And I suppose I should finally point out that the Sun through the weekend is in the last degree of Virgo, and honestly, while it's moving through the last degree of Virgo, or the last couple of degrees of Virgo, it is opposition Neptune, and I think particularly during the first half of the weekend, and into Sunday, at least for perhaps 3/4 of the weekend, you need to hold firmly to what you know and trust, and not be tempted to do anything that is unplanned, because that Sun opposition Neptune could be confusing, and I suppose in a worst case scenario you could do things which just undermine yourself, and you don't want to undermine yourself. And if you're at home, I suppose be on the lookout for, I don't know, it could be problems perhaps relating to water. Neptune is a planet of water. The Sun is in Virgo, opposition Neptune in Pisces. That does indicate water damage, mistakes done with water, things boiling over, just not being aware. And very often the reason Geminis are not aware is because they're thinking about something else. And so perhaps you should try to make a special effort to be grounded this weekend, and not to make any changeover until you are good and ready. But I don't want to take away from the fact that at the end of the weekend, the moon does move into Gemini, the sun moves into Libra, and for a Gemini, that is really good news, because you transition from being out of sync to being very much in sync, to being part of the flow of humanity, and I think that's going to just make you feel good. Cancer. Cancer, on Saturday, I think that you are probably in a fairly harmonious, sociable mood. You're quite tolerant. I think that you can deal with people, and I think you can also deal with other people's idiosyncrasies. I mean, I suppose everyone has their idiosyncrasies, and over the course of Saturday, it won't bother you too much. I think the reason it won't bother you too much is because you, I suppose, have a good understanding of human nature, and perhaps you're a difficult person to surprise. Where are the surprises if you're a Cancerian? If you know people, if you truly know people, then sure, you are not going to be surprised. And when something happens, you will have, in many respects, you will have had good warning. So that means that I think that you can be socially active, and when things happen that you hadn't planned for, I don't think you're going to be too bothered. In fact, on Saturday, Cancer, you may be able to spring a few surprises of your own. I mean, after all, on Saturday we have a build-up to a conjunction between the moon and Uranus. Okay, that moon conjunct Uranus may be more about Sunday if you're in Australia or New Zealand or East Asia, but that moon conjunct Uranus is going to give you the ability to do things differently, and also to be an individual. You are an individual. You have your particular way of doing things, which is very unique, and I don't think that you should be afraid of being unique, because it will be actually in accord with the times in which we're living. Moon is making a conjunction to Uranus. Yes, Moon is actually making a trine to Pluto as well. So in fact, Cancer, if you want things to happen and you feel they need to happen, you feel there's a need for some kind of transformation, for perhaps an old order to be brought down, for something new to replace it, then I think that's the kind of thing that you can actually bring into action. And matters are further helped by the fact that the Moon makes a trine to the Sun, and Moon trine Suns, it's a very harmonious aspect, and it's almost like, Cancer, you can bring about change in a harmonious way. Now, on Sunday, especially if you're in the Americas, and later on Sunday if you're in Europe and Africa, the Moon moves into Gemini. And so with the Moon moving into Gemini, I do think that Cancerians are going to want to slow down. And you'll feel that you haven't got all the energy in the world. You might feel that, you might feel your own nervous energy a little bit, and you might also think that perhaps other people just are too much of a good thing. You can kind of take it too far. Certain people have dynamic personalities, and if you spend too much time with them, you could just totally frazzle yourself. So as you move into Sunday, and this is not just about Sunday, as in Monday as well, a bit of calm, a bit of reflection might be very useful. And perhaps what's happening is you're getting ready for the Moon to move into Cancer. Moon will move into Cancer in a couple of days' time, and that will create its own challenges, but also create its own opportunities. But the Moon is not in Cancer yet. The Moon is moving into Gemini, so we don't want to jump the gun. So perhaps by the end of the weekend, it is time for Cancerians to recharge their batteries. Leo. So Leo, there are a few things going on. Firstly, I should say that the Sun, which is of course your ruler, is now moving through the last degree of Virgo, getting ready for the changeover, the Sun moving from Virgo to Libra. And as far as this changeover is concerned, it is the equinox. The autumnal equinox, at least autumnal from a northern hemisphere perspective, the autumnal equinox is by definition the time when the Sun moves into Libra. At least if you use a tropical zodiac. Just a reminder, astrologers, when they think about the signs of a zodiac, most Western astrologers use a tropical zodiac. They use a zodiac which is based on the seasons. The stars and constellations are not part of it. I mean, that might sound counterintuitive, but that is the way Western astrology has developed. And very often people use this straw man attack on astrology, saying, all the signs of the zodiac are out of sync with the constellations. Well, that just is, I suppose, not really understanding what the basis of Western astrology actually is. Going back 2,000 years, looking at Ptolemy, he was talking about a tropical zodiac. Anyway, the Sun is moving into tropical Libra, and that sign change happens at 13:44 on Sunday. In other words, that is 1:44 p.m. on Sunday London time. So, in fact, it's going to be early in the morning if you're in the Americas. It can be late at night on Sunday if you're in Australia or New Zealand. In fact, early on Monday morning. You're getting ready for that change, and when you're getting ready for the change, it is a bit like a snake having to shed its skin, isn't it? It's snakes. I've got snakes on the mind. By the way, it's because I was with these YouTube algorithms. I was looking at snakes, and I've been looking at a lot of snake videos at the moment. I've been obsessed with snake videos, and it all started with that guy in South Carolina getting bitten by an inland taipan, and that was a story I found fascinating. And then YouTube noticed that I was into snake videos, so it's giving me lots and lots of snake videos to watch. And so snakes changing their skin is something that immediately comes to mind. But it's about you perhaps changing your skin, the sun moving from Virgo into Libra. And when you're changing your skin, you may at some level be a bit more sluggish than usual because you're getting ready for a transition. And I do think that the sun moving from Virgo into Libra in many respects is a fortunate change for Leos, because sun in Virgo can be a little bit too materialistic for your liking, and it can be a time when you're focusing on things that you don't really want to focus on, but you kind of have to focus on them. And then the sun moves into Libra, and it just may feel that things are a little bit easier. You can perhaps be more communicative, have more variety in your life, just have a generally feeling more amused, and there are more ways to enjoy yourself. So I think that is a good thing. I'll talk about it more on Monday, but right now, when you're in this transitional phase, you are perhaps a little bit vulnerable. And another thing, Leo, that might make you vulnerable is the fact that the sun is opposition Neptune. Now, the Sun opposition Neptune is something I will be talking about later in this video in more detail. But the Sun is your ruler. It's getting ready to change sign from Virgo into Libra. It is making an 180-degree aspect to Neptune, and Neptune can be quite undermining. It can be quite confusing. It is the planet of the sea, and Leo, you are a fixed sign. You like things to be sorted out right in front of you. You want to know what's going on, and you want things to be clear. And Neptune is not clear at all. So Neptune can undermine your foundations. You think you're building something secure, but Neptune just undermines it. And so be aware of that. And perhaps this weekend it's important not to try to start something, because if you try to start something this weekend, Neptune will just come along and just eat away at its foundations. I like to think perhaps of, someone trying to build a sandcastle, and the tide is coming in, and the tide is just undermining the foundations of that sandcastle. And so it's perhaps a time for contemplation and thinking and kind of working out where you're going, rather than actually starting anything. Because if you try to start something, it could be a completely sort of hopeless process. You try to start, gets undermined, you start again, and you have to start again and again and again, and it drives you crazy. So perhaps you need to wait until that Sun opposition Neptune has passed. Now, the Sun opposition Neptune is at maximum strength at the beginning of the weekend. Once the Sun has gone into Libra, I think that we'll see the Sun opposition Neptune really start to lose its strength. So don't worry too much about that Sun opposition Neptune. It's quite a temporary thing, and probably is going to be stronger on Saturday than on Sunday. Now, we also have a moon trine the Sun happening this weekend, and perhaps later in the weekend, but we got the moon in Gemini making a trine aspect eventually to the Sun in Libra. And I think that aspect is going to help you. When the actual trine happens, the exact moment of the trine happens, the moon will be still in Taurus, and the sun will still be in Virgo, but the moment the sun and the moon changes sign, this trine will still be around, and I think that it's at that stage that you will be able to benefit from it. And I think that that trine is going to just make you feel more comfortable and more at one with the world. You know, moon trine sun, I often like to see moon trine sun as being something quite harmonious, and I think that it can take you a bit of time to find that harmony, but by the end of a weekend, I think you're going to feel better able to relate and to understand what's going on. Virgo. The Virgo season, at least from the sun's perspective, is coming to an end. The sun is about to leave Virgo. And you are a Virgo. Virgo leaving your sign. You may feel a bit sad about it. It's nice to have the sun in your sign. Of course, if you're reading this from a perspective of your sun sign rather than, say, your ascendant sign or your moon sign, of course, it does mean, of course, your birthday season is coming to an end. Now, sun leaving Virgo, I think in some ways it might be a good thing for you. You know, when you've got the sun moving through Virgo, it does put, or it has put, a little bit of pressure on you. You know, you felt that, or you are feeling that there were things that you had to do. You may have had a certain sense of responsibility, and you know that responsibility could have been a bit irksome. It's a kind of responsibility that you feel that you shouldn't necessarily have had to worry about, but still you did have to worry about, and it was annoying. And so perhaps when the sun leaves Virgo and moves into Libra, you know, some of that responsibility will ease, and perhaps you can be, you know, more of a free spirit. And as the sun moves into Virgo, as the sun moves out of Virgo, it does make an opposition to Neptune. So the sun in the last couple of degrees of Virgo, opposition Neptune. Neptune's in Pisces. Pisces is your opposite sign, and this weekend, especially at the beginning of the weekend, it just may occur to you that certain people, certain situations are just completely undermining you. They're not helpful, they're confusing, and you may actually feel that you're not being told the truth. I mean, the truth is actually quite important to Virgos, and you want to be told the truth, and you want to understand what's going on, and it just may feel that that information is being denied to you, and that's perhaps a feeling you've been getting over the last few days, you know, maybe Thursday, Friday, and it's perhaps culminating now, and that annoys you because you want to be in a position of knowledge, and you know, if you feel that you can't entirely trust your instincts, or you can't trust what other people are saying, then that's a situation that is not exactly reassuring. So what you perhaps have to do is maybe move beyond the facts as they are presented, but try to see things at a sort of a higher level. And I think you can do this because, you know, we do have a Grand Trine in Earth signs this weekend. And Virgo, you are an Earth sign. You know, we do have Moon conjunct Uranus in Taurus, which is trine Pluto in Capricorn, which is trine the Sun in that last couple of degrees of Virgo. And so rather than get sort of caught on detail, which is a trap that some Virgos can get themselves into, the Grand Trine in Earth will allow you to see things in a new way. You actually look at your material environment and you can imagine it in a new way, and at the same time you can perhaps get in contact with nature. You know, the material environment is not just about concrete blocks. The material environment is, of course, about the earth. It's about trees. It's about nature. And I think with this with this Grand Trine in Earth, you can tune into nature. And, you know, I've talked about that Sun opposition Neptune in perhaps a negative way, but there may actually be a positive dimension to that Sun opposition Neptune. It may be about transcendence. And, okay, you can't completely transcend yourself, because if we have true transcendence, you know, it can actually undermine us. You know, we do need an ego to an extent, but getting a sense of everything around you, your natural material environment, I think could be great. And you just may have a fleeting vision of a way things should be, and also a fleeting vision of what is wrong with everything around you. And it could be uplifting. And in the end, if you go beyond the details, but also keep in mind that you've got to have both feet firmly on the ground, you can just get a sense that you are actually part of something that is much larger than yourself, and there can be a quiet sense of satisfaction and harmony and, transcendence. Now, the moon does move into Gemini at some stage this weekend. On Sunday, might be late on Sunday, might even be a little bit into Monday morning. But moon in Gemini does create a somewhat different energy there. Moon in Gemini is about what you want to do, what you want to achieve, and the moon is moving into Gemini at the same time as the sun is moving into Libra. And so, you know, the sun moving out of your sign. And I think that trine between the moon in Gemini and the sun in Libra, I wouldn't have said actually that it's particularly spiritual. And I suppose you have to accept your spirituality, understand and appreciate and nurture your spirituality, but at the same time, you do have to function in the real world. And I think that the moon in Gemini can enable you to focus on your ambitions and what you're trying to achieve, even if what you're trying to achieve is in its own way quite petty. I mean, it's petty compared with the living creation, that is true, but it's still important in the here and now. And so by focusing on your achievement as you move into next week, as you move into Monday, I think that you can start to think about what you want to do, what you want to achieve, and in fact, maybe how much money you want to earn, perhaps, or there may be a financial dimension to the sun moving into Libra. I mean, I don't want to spend too much time talking about it now, but as the sun moves into Libra, I do think that you might have a new understanding of your finances and how you want to sort your finances out, and what changes need to be made and how you can perhaps rebalance things. But anyway, I'll talk about that when I do your horoscope for Monday. Libra, it's important that you don't underestimate yourself. You certainly have a lot to contribute, and in your own way, you look at things and you think, well, you know, things could be better. And deep down, you realize that things are not going to just change of their own accord. You have to actually do something to actually make them change. And it is all about perhaps how you present yourself, how you work through the best way of altering your environment. Do you want to do it quickly or do you want to do it slowly? But at some level, you just know it's not good enough. And I do understand, Libra, that you like to keep things level and balanced and you don't want to upset anyone. But, if you go through life not upsetting anyone, then really, nothing much is going to happen. But I don't think that Librans should always be seen as people that just focus on harmony to the exclusion of all else. I mean, there are some Librans who are, very strong personality. Margaret Thatcher, she was a Libran. Margaret Thatcher, at her peak was just not into compromise, not into balance, not into keeping people happy. So that perhaps for some Librans might be a good role model. Maybe you can't stand Margaret Thatcher, but just she's an example of a strong Libran. I suppose I might also mention Vladimir Putin is a Libran. I understand that perhaps half the people watching this can't stand Vladimir Putin, but still, he's been in charge of Russia for a long time, over 20 years. So Librans are not weak, and Librans can make things happen. And right now, Libra, I think you should be trying to make things happen, because I think you have a clear vision of the way things should be. Though at the beginning of a weekend, Libra, you're probably going to want to keep things to yourself. It's like the wheels are turning, but you just don't feel the time is right. I mean, you can feel the pressure. I think the pressure is building up, but looked at from an outsider's perspective, people might not see that anything's going on. It's just you being a normal, happy-go-lucky Libra, and they can't see behind the mask. But something is going on, and I think at a certain stage you're going to want to almost reveal what you've been working on. And there are some important sign changes going on. The moon is about to move into Gemini, and of course Gemini is an air sign. Gemini is a sign that has a natural affinity with Libra, and also we have the autumnal equinox, at least autumnal in the northern hemisphere, and that is when the sun moves from Virgo into Libra. And the autumnal equinox really does matter, because the sun is moving into your sign. And with the sun moving into your sign, that gives you power, it gives you strength, and it gives you a sense that you can make things happen. And it can be a time of year when you can really show the world what you can do. So you do not have to be satisfied with the status quo, and perhaps in some respects your job is to overthrow the status quo. Now, when we look at Venus, which is your ruler, Venus is itself going through a sign change. Venus is getting ready to move into Scorpio, and Venus moving into Scorpio, in some respects it does make things more complicated. You perhaps have to move from, considering not just what you are, but what you've got. But I don't really want to talk about Venus and Scorpio in this video, because that's more about Monday. So when I talk about the what's going on for you on Monday, I'll go into this Venus and Scorpio. But just before Venus moves into Scorpio, Venus in very late Libra makes a square to Pluto, and that's another big aspect. And I think with this Venus square Pluto Libra, you could find yourself taking things very seriously. You will have a sense of not just your own power, but also what is perhaps preventing you from asserting the full power of your personality. So you have a sense of your power and also your lack of power. And you just may get insights into what actually is holding you back. And to begin with, it might be frustrating, but you might just feel that you can see all these people and you have to deal with these people. You have to make them happy, and that can be a bit aggravating. And it might actually be quite aggravating in a sense of your family and your domestic life. You can perhaps see how members of your family, or all the routines around your own home, are making things difficult for you, are preventing you from achieving your potential. And with that Venus square Pluto, you may feel that it's time for some kind of transformation. So in terms of your relationship to your home and family over the weekend, you may feel that something has to give, and it could be hard. You don't want to upset anyone, but at the same time, there is something that has to be said. And so Libra, perhaps you have to work out, the best way of, saying whatever needs to be said. I think you'll get it right. I mean, Librans are able to be diplomatic if they try. I mean, Libra is a very diplomatic sign. So you can be strong, but you can also be diplomatic. And I think that in most cases, people will understand what you're talking about. And I think that you can create changes that will be lasting and will certainly make your life a lot easier. So that is some of the main stuff going on over the weekend. Moon moving into Gemini. I think Moon moving on into Gemini is going to be helpful. It's going to make things easier for you. So over the course of Sunday, Moon will be moving from Taurus to Gemini. And with the Moon moving into Gemini, you're probably going to feel more relaxed, but also you may feel better able to tell everyone what's on your mind. I suppose you'll perhaps be less of an introvert. When the Moon was in Taurus, particularly when it was conjunct Uranus, there were a lot of things you were thinking through, working out, but it was all rather complicated, and you didn't feel that you had the chance to do anything about it. But with the Moon moving into Gemini, I think it's easier to breathe. I mean, obviously the Moon moving into Gemini, it's an air sign, and Libra is an air sign. So you can breathe, and you can, I think, express yourself, and also you'll have a sense of some kind of vision, some broader vision of what's going on around you, and being able to be part of it. So as the weekend progresses, as the Moon moves into Gemini, things I think will be easier, though don't forget what's going on in your home and your relations with your family, because I think with that Venus square Pluto, there may be something that needs to be renegotiated, or at least negotiated. So don't be afraid of telling people what's on your mind, because I think it will just make things easier for everyone. Scorpio, the Moon is continuing to move through Taurus, at least on Saturday it is, and with the Moon moving through Taurus, you can't help thinking about other people and their impact on you. Whether or not it's a fortunate impact. I think in many cases it could be quite disruptive, and I think that if there are disruptions in your life, discontinuities in your life, I think, Scorpio, you may be very quick to blame others, though it's important not to project. It may be that at some level you've been allowing people to create disruptions and discontinuities, and perhaps it's a time when you need to make a greater effort to take control and just admit to yourself that you are in control. And as the weekend progresses, as the Moon moves out of Taurus into Gemini, then I think that you will probably be more independent. So I think you end the weekend, I think, being more independent, being more focused on yourself than you were perhaps at the beginning of the weekend. And a lot of that independence may be emotional. you're perhaps thinking about your way of doing things, your way of feeling, and having quite powerful feelings which in the first instance perhaps can't always be shared with others. And I suppose that's kind of part of the Scorpio experience, having powerful feelings, concentrating on those feelings, and just taking the view that there's just no point in trying to talk about them because just people would not understand. And I think that you do need to respect that, and remembering also that heliocentrically, Mercury, remember heliocentrically, not geocentrically, heliocentrically, Mercury is making a square to Mars, and Mars is your ruler, and that Mercury square Mars might make you a little bit difficult to deal with, and it may be a lot to do with the things you say. You could be quick to say things, particularly if you feel offended or you feel that someone is not behaving right. You'll be quick to express your opinions, and your annoyance could be very obvious. But I think perhaps you should try, if possible, to curb that. I mean, I think that if you were able to just look after yourself and look after your own interests, put your own interests first, and not worry too much about what others are doing, then I think things would be easier for you. Now, one thing that is going on that perhaps we need to mention is the fact that the Sun is opposition Neptune. So the Sun opposition Neptune may have something to say about what you perceive as being your direction in life. I think in a Scorpio chart, the Sun is very much about direction. And so with Sun opposition Neptune, it may be about confused direction or not being sure where your direction lies. And that's a difficult position for a Scorpio to be in, because Scorpio is a fixed sign. Scorpio likes to have a strong sense of where it's going, a strong sense of purpose. And perhaps over the last few days, this sense of purpose may have been sort of undermined by Neptune, and you were forced to ask questions about yourself and where you were going, questions that you didn't really want to ask. And that might suggest a certain point of vulnerability, but I think it's a point of vulnerability that, I mean, it needn't bother you too much, provided you don't do anything. I mean, when I say do anything, make any decisions. This weekend is not a good time to be making decisions. Whether you're telling someone what you want to do, what you're going to do, or making internal decisions. Because sometimes we make an internal decision and we stick to it. We don't want to think about it anymore. We've made up our mind, we're going to do it. And it doesn't matter what else happens. And there's a temptation to get yourself into that situation. But with Sun opposition Neptune, I think that's a very bad idea, because you don't want too much fixity of purpose right now, because you might be fixing on something which is fundamentally unstable. So just do consider that, and try, if possible, Scorpio, to have an open mind this weekend, and also to watch yourself, watch what you're doing, and watch what you're good at. Look at how you are interacting, and perhaps what opportunities you have to show off your abilities and your talents. And you may notice things. You may notice that you're very good at something, and if you're very good at something, it does need to be nurtured. And as soon as you start to show off what you can do, a lot of people are going to be surprised. You can do something that is of lasting value, perhaps of lasting creativity, creative and artistic value. I think that is very much something you can do. And if you feel that something is working, then you should really you should be giving it more and more resources without necessarily making a decision. It's because this week is not a good time for making decisions. And I should also say that you perhaps are starting to become aware that your business and entrepreneurial skills are good, if that's appropriate. And so if there's something you feel you really want to put energy into of a business or entrepreneurial nature, then now might be your chance to start thinking about it. Again, not a time for making decisions, but perhaps as you move into next week, you'll get a greater sense of what you need to do, what you'd like to do, and maybe you can actually start to make decisions, but leave it till early next week. Now is not a time to be really making up your mind, because the situation is just a little bit too unstable with that Sun opposition Neptune. Sagittarius. Sagittarius, you are thinking about what's going on, and you're wondering whether it's right, and you're probably more sensitive than usual to your environment and its darkness. And when I say your environment, I'm talking about probably your neighborhood and your community, and okay, maybe the country in which you live. I suppose it could be the world in which you live, but you are aware of its darkness, and still you can be surprised. You can be surprised by how bad the world can be. It is kind of shocking when you look at the news, when you turn on the TV, when you browse the internet, however you get your information. It is shocking, and I think that is something that you are going to be picking up on. And I mean, I know that Sagittarians are probably better able to deal with surprises than most other people, but there is still that capacity to be surprised, and to be surprised in a way that maybe isn't always nice. But I don't think these surprises and this sense that you're living in a bad world is it's not personal, but it gets to you because Sagittarius is a moral sign fundamentally. That is often forgotten, that Sagittarius is ruled by Jupiter, and Sagittarians actually have a strong sense of right and wrong, and there may be things going on over the weekend that in some ways offend that sense of right and wrong. Now, on a more sort of down-to-earth level, I think Sagittarius, you start the weekend trying to grapple with matter, the three-dimensional world. You understand it's important. You'd like it if it perhaps wasn't important, but you're still having to grapple with it. And you're perhaps thinking about, what kind of routines you should be creating for yourself, again, especially on Saturday, and to what extent those routines might get disrupted. And there may well be disruptions on Saturday. And the reason for that is that we've got a Grand Trine in Earth signs. We have got the moon in Taurus, conjunct Uranus, trine the Sun, trine Pluto, and it kind of does have an impact on you. And you're aware of how quickly things can change and how quickly you can be messed around. But it does work both ways. You actually have the capacity to create your own routines out of nowhere, something you just put together and you're not taking it very seriously, and you actually realize you've created a routine, perhaps not just for yourself, but also for other people. Now, the moon is in a late Taurus, and on Sunday, the moon moves into Gemini, and that is a little bit of a change. And with the moon moving into Gemini, Gemini is your opposite sign, and so with the moon moving into Gemini, it may be a time when you can perhaps be a little lighter, not worry quite so much about what's going on in the world around you, not quite, worrying about perhaps the sense of tragedy in the world out there. Lacrimae mundi, isn't that the tears of the world? Getting concerned about that. That's perhaps something that you're perhaps picking up on. And so Sunday, things do get lighter, and you can start to perhaps enjoy people's company. And I think actually by Sunday you're actually needing a little bit of levity. You need to be able to relax and be able to perhaps just gossip, worry not about your own experiences, worry about other people's experiences, listen to what people have to say. Yeah, if you can socialize on Sunday in a sort of a light-hearted way, I think that would be a nice relief for you, and you'll be helped by the fact not just that the moon is moving into Gemini. So much easier for a Sagittarius moon being in Gemini than being in Taurus, but also it is the autumnal equinox. Sun moves from Virgo into Libra. So Sun moving into Libra just takes the pressure off you, and it allows you perhaps to sort of express yourself in a social environment and be able to sort of tell people what's on your mind, and you'll then realize you'll realize that when you start talking about something, perhaps you'll realize that it's not as serious as you thought it was. And I think the ability to trivialize things, normally trivialization is not a good thing, but a bit of trivialization may actually be useful, because you don't want to take the world too seriously. And so I think overall, a Sagittarius, Sunday does look like being an easier day than Saturday. Capricorn. So Capricorn, we continue to have a Grand Trine in Earth signs. In fact, I talked about the Grand Trine in Earth signs on Friday, but over the weekend, the Grand Trine in Earth signs just becomes more and more intense. And it's because of the moon. The moon is now moving into late Taurus. So with the moon in late Taurus, we now have a situation where the moon is conjunct Uranus, it's trine Pluto, the moon is trine the sun, and of course the sun is trine Pluto, and the sun is trine Uranus. And so we have got we've got 4 planets involved in this Earth Grand Trine, and because you are an Earth sign, this Grand Trine has a big impact on you, and you feel a continuing sense of, I think, control. And I talked about this when I was doing your forecasts of Friday. There is a sense of control, that you do actually control your material environment, and you can make things happen. Now, you may doubt that you make things happen, but you can make things happen. Now, it may be, Capricorn, you look at something and you think, this is going to be difficult to pull off. It's going to require a lot of work. But when you've got Grand Trines, things move easier. Grand Trines are like, perhaps, when you've got a mechanical system, but you put some oil in it, and all these rusty cogs, they finally start moving, and then soon enough they're moving really, really quickly. And so you can, you can move very, very quickly. And you can perhaps strike very, very quickly, if need be. And so, you might seem on the outside to be quite, taciturn, not doing much. But when you're provoked, you can actually sort of move very, very quickly. And as I was telling another sign, I was looking, I've been spending a lot of time looking at snake videos. I don't know why, just YouTube is giving me lots of snake videos. And there are these snakes, what are they called? Gaboon vipers. They just sit there and they don't do anything. But apparently they strike really, really quickly, and they've got the biggest fangs in the reptile world. Of any snake, they've got the biggest fangs. But they seem as if they're really slow and they're going to do anything, but then they can attack very quickly. And I suppose that's the nature of a snake, but this particular snake. And so perhaps you should think about that model, you as just being very slow, seeming almost harmless in your slowness, but when you are riled, when you see the opportunity, you are able actually to move very, very quickly. And I will try very hard not to talk about snakes in future videos, because I've talked too much about snakes recently. I don't know why that is. But anyway, so you can move quickly, and I think you're going to be very much helped by that Grand Trine in Earth signs. And so I think ideally on Saturday, you should plan to have a fairly busy day. I think it would be a shame if you were to do nothing on Saturday. You take the view, well, it's a weekend, nothing can be done. Wait until the new week. I think there is work to be done on Saturday, and if there's something that you have been dreading, you haven't wanted to do it because it just seemed too tedious or for whatever reason, now's the time to do it, because you'll be able to probably do it 3 times more quickly than usual. So as you move into Sunday, the moon does move out of Taurus and it does move into Gemini. And we also, by the way, have the sun moving into Libra. So sun moves into Libra because that is the autumnal equinox. So sun moving into Libra on Sunday, moon moving into Gemini. That is a big change. And with the moon moving into Gemini, it is like you can see what you can do. You can understand what you can do. But with the moon moving into Gemini, then it's actually more emphasis on structure. So you have to structure something that you're good at, or something that needs to be structured, but you have to do it in a fairly imaginative way. You want to kind of create structures that are not totally fixed, that have a certain amount of flexibility to them. And then we've got the sun moving into Libra. I don't want to spend too much time talking about the sun in Libra, because I think probably it's better to talk about it tomorrow, on Monday. But basically Libra is it's a cardinal point. And so with the sun moving into Libra, okay, London time, that happens at around 1:45, 1:44 in the afternoon. It happened earlier in the Americas, later in Asia, Australia, New Zealand, but at some stage the sun will move into Libra. And it is a time when you do start to think about what needs to be done, and I think it is at a time when you're going to be wanting to focus on some of your ambitions, but it does have to be done in the right way, because the sun is starting to make a conjunction to the south node, and it's quite easy to focus on an ambition but to perhaps go about it in the wrong way, and you have to get the balance right. But I wouldn't worry too much about it at the moment. I'll be discussing that on Monday. Aquarius, things are in a sort of a process of change. So, the moon is in Taurus. At least the moon starts a weekend in Taurus, and so with the moon moving through Taurus, you may feel that there's not really a great deal you want to do, that you're happy to just stay put. I mean, that is your immediate view. But the moon is making a conjunction to Uranus. And with that moon conjunct Uranus, that could stir things up. You try to make things settled. You try to ground things, but in the very process of grounding things, you can actually make things more chaotic, and you're actually attracting events that you simply weren't expecting. And so on Saturday, I suppose, don't be complacent, because your very attempts to create stability may actually create instability. And then you have to ask why. Well, one reason why is perhaps because it's time to move on. Perhaps you've become a little too set in your ways over the last couple of days, and you need to start to contemplate some kind of change. And perhaps that change comes about when the moon moves into Gemini. Of course, on Sunday, moon moves out of Taurus into Gemini, and at the same time on Sunday we've got the sun moving from Virgo into Libra. So what we've got there is activity in two air signs. Gemini is activated, Libra is activated, and of course Aquarius is an air sign. And so on Sunday you feel something happening, and you feel that something actually is going your way. You feel that it's just easier to understand what's going on, and you just might feel a greater sense of freedom. And perhaps Sunday is a time where you can start doing something that is unique to you. You don't have to worry about impressing anyone, whether it's in terms of work or your friends or your family. It's not about impressing anyone. It's just doing something that is a natural extension of who you are. And that's perhaps how you can benefit from the moon moving into Gemini. And the moon is actually making a trine to the sun, which is moving into Libra. And so that trine gives you a sense of your uniqueness. And of course, Aquarians like to feel that they are unique people. And yeah, of course, we are all unique. And I think that that's going to be especially clear on Sunday. Now, one thing that we do have on Sunday in particular is that Sunday we do have a square between Venus and Pluto. Now, Venus is in very late Libra, Pluto is of course in late Capricorn, and they are making a square. Now, the reason that aspect matters for you, Aquarius, is because Saturn is making a square to the Venus-Pluto midpoint. Now, the reason that Venus-Pluto midpoint is important is because Venus and Pluto are in square. So, are in square aspect. And so, that Saturn aspect, I think, will remind you that certain relationships could be a little complicated, perhaps on an emotional level, and other people should not be taken for granted, and you mustn't make assumptions about their behavior. And you should also consider your own behavior, because you might find that your own feelings and how they relate to your actions are actually in themselves quite complicated. So don't make yourself out to be emotionally simple. You can be as emotionally complicated as anyone. And perhaps things are made even more interesting by the fact that the Sun is opposition Neptune. The Sun in the Aquarian chart represents relationships. It's opposition Neptune. Neptune is a planet of sort of boundaries becoming a little diffuse. And so when we put together Sun opposition Neptune with Saturn square the Venus-Pluto midpoint, we get the idea that relationships can be complicated, and you just should not assume that things are going to run smoothly, and you shouldn't make assumptions about what people are thinking and feeling. They may be thinking and feeling something completely different, something completely unexpected. Now, that is, of course, one of the great mysteries, isn't it? It doesn't matter how close we are to someone, we will never, ever, ever know what they're thinking and feeling. We might get close to it, but we're never going to know for sure. And I think that you perhaps have to live with that uncertainty, not just the uncertainty, but also with that permanent mystery. Pisces. Pisces, you understand that where you're living, the environment in which you're living is not simple. Perhaps it never has been simple, but at the moment it perhaps seems just a little more complicated than usual. And you're quite aware of the unpleasantness around you. It does exist, and it doesn't necessarily touch you personally, but it's still there, it still exists. And perhaps you just need to accept it and not be freaked out by it. And, when you see something happening, or you see something in the news happening that just seems really disturbing, yeah, it's easy to be bothered by it, but it's perhaps just part of the human experience. It's just part of the experience of the world in which we're living. And as a Pisces, it's a world in which you're very sensitive to it, and it does have an impact on you. And people can be overly influenced by external events. External events can be major distractions. I mean, some people can decide things are so bad they have to, I don't know, go to Gaza, go to fight in Ukraine, or they can feel they have to give up everything and go to the third world and whatever. People can do that. I suppose in a previous generation, in the 30s, in the Spanish, people would go and fight in the Spanish Civil War, often get killed in the Spanish Civil War, but I'm sure we're not talking about anything like that. But things out there can have an influence on you, but don't over-dramatize the situation. The world has always been difficult, and there have always been tragedies going on throughout history. It just so happens that with the internet and with communication and newspapers, we now know about what is going on. But I suppose all of that is a bit, I don't know, I suppose I'm exaggerating a bit. No, I won't say exaggerating, but perhaps I'm talking about something which isn't entirely relevant to you. It's certainly not relevant to your here and now, but somehow you might decide to try to make it relevant. And I'm suggesting perhaps that you need a sense of proportion. Now, as far as what's absolutely happening today, we do have a Grand Trine in Earth signs, and there is a conjunction between the Moon and Uranus, and that conjunction between the Moon and Uranus could excite you. I mean, perhaps it could excite you in the way I've just been talking about. It is about news, it is about communication, it's about finding things out, but it's also just about the whole way in which you come across. I think that you can actually come across in quite a powerful way. It's as if you've really got something to offer, something to contribute, and you perhaps feel that the way you come across can actually change things. And it may be just about the urgency of your message. But I don't think you have to take things too far. I don't think you have to exaggerate. And I think that as you move into Sunday, as the moon moves out of Taurus into Gemini, I think, Pisces, that things will start to slow down, and you can sort of perhaps find a greater sense of perspective, and you'll perhaps start to appreciate your grounding and your security better, and perhaps it will just be easier for you to get things in perspective, and you maybe don't have to worry quite so much about what's going on out there, and perhaps you can go on some kind of inner journey. Perhaps the inner journey is where the best journeys really are, and maybe it's an inner journey that can take you through, and certainly for the next month until late October. But I'll be talking about that when I do your horoscope for Monday. Okay, Pisces, that's it. And that's it for the 12 signs. And now I want to look at the weekend from a viewpoint of the I Ching. So I ask the question, what is the weekend going to be like for those watching the I Ching section of this video? And the first hexagram I got was hexagram number 36, which is the darkening of the light. And on the surface, this hexagram seems a little bit grim. Darkening of the light does indicate that the times in which we are living are not perfect, that at some level we are finding it very difficult to express ourselves, and people aren't aware of who we are, what our abilities are. We may just feel a little bit ignored, and it is the times in which we're living, perhaps. And darkening of your light may be that sort of inferior elements are starting to make their influence felt. I mean, I'm sorry to use the word inferior elements, but I'm just sort of using I Ching language. That's how the I Ching likes to see it. And so it may actually feel that we're sort of hunting for some kind of evil. What is this evil thing that is just creating this darkness? So that is certainly a possibility, and I think it's just a time when where we feel that something is wrong, and we're trying to deal with it, and we're not being recognized, and overall it's not good. But I think we do have an awareness of who we are and what we could offer if we just had the chance, and we're just being ignored. No one cares, maybe, or people who know less than us, not as experienced as us, not as knowledgeable as us, they're the ones getting the attention. Maybe they've got better PR skills than we have. So that's one way in which the darkening of the light could work. Now, there is a moving line here, and the third line from the bottom moves. Now, normally, the third line from the bottom in an I Ching, or very often, the third line from the bottom tends not to be fortunate. But this third line is a bit of darkening of the light is interesting, because it tells us that almost by accident we come across the source of the problem. And I think the Wilhelm I Ching talks about accidentally coming across the enemy commander. And so we accidentally come across the enemy commander, and we can perhaps capture the enemy commander. So we find the source of the problem. And that is obviously great. And if we find the source of a problem, then whatever was holding us back, whatever was preventing us from finding out our true potential and expressing our true potential, whatever was preventing us from being recognized, we now know what it is. And so the question is, what do we do about it? And of course, it may actually be a literal person. If someone has been making our life miserable, then we start to find out who it is, and we are in a position to take action. But the I Ching cautions us. It cautions us against taking things too far. Just because we're in a position of control, authority, because of this sudden, unexpected event, doesn't mean we should take full advantage of it. If we're looking to transform the situation, we need to take it slowly, and we don't want to be too harsh. We don't want to be critical. Just because we know that someone is at fault, that someone has been getting in our way, doesn't mean that we should take the opportunity to attack, criticize, whatever we feel we might want to do to bring this person down or change this situation. We need to take it slowly. And so that is approach perhaps we should take. Now, there is an alternative interpretation here, and with the darkening of the light in a more sort of hierarchical sense. I don't know whether this is relevant, but sort of Greg Winkup, in his book translation of the I Ching, he sees this in terms of darkening of the light, or as being an official who is not being taken seriously. It's not being given the opportunities the official needs and he should be given, and he not being treated well by his ruler, or her ruler, I suppose, if you translate it into the modern world, not Chinese court life, however many centuries ago. But if you're in that situation, then with this moving hexagram, it's perhaps finding a new ruler, and so someone better, someone who appreciates our talents more. So actually, this hexagram might then have relevance, if you take Greg Winkup's interpretation, to perhaps issues of employment. So, for example, if you're working in a job and you're not being taken seriously, you've got these talents, you've got these abilities, and you're being ignored, or perhaps other people working, they're getting all the attention, and then the suggestion here with that moving line is that actually one can actually switch to a new allegiance, find a new ruler, which I suppose logically finding a new ruler is finding a new job. I mean, that's one way of looking at it. I'm not telling you to give up your job just because of this. I just think about it. It may not be about jobs. It may be, I don't know, it could be politics. Maybe you're involved in a political party and you're not being taken seriously when you go to local meetings, and so you want to go somewhere else, join a new party. It may not be about political parties. It could be activities, just perhaps wanting to move from one group to another group because you've got these talents, you're not being taken seriously by one group of people, and you feel you want to shift your allegiance to something else. Anyway, because of the third line moving, that does take us to a different hexagram, and that takes us to hexagram 24, which is return. And return is quite a good hexagram. It gives us the idea of returning to normal. So perhaps having found out the problem, found out what's holding us back, and starting to address that problem, in the end, maybe not today or immediately, perhaps over the next week, we can return things to normal and go back to where we were how we started. And I think that it's not a return as in sense of stagnation. Oh, we have to start all over again. It's a return that is the right thing to do, and we're just feeling comfortable again. And perhaps we're feeling comfortable because we're being appreciated and we're using our talents in the right way. And now I want to talk about the Sun opposition Neptune. So we have this Sun opposition Neptune over the weekend, and it's actually at the beginning of the weekend, but still this is an aspect that I did want to talk about. So what we've got, turning to this aspect, we have, there's the Sun, late Virgo, opposition Neptune, late Pisces. I suppose I should tell you exactly when this aspect is. It's the actual Sun opposition Neptune aspect the exact aspect is at 1:17 a.m. on Saturday, London time. So in fact, that takes place late afternoon in the Americas, or it would be, I don't know, sort of late morning in Australia or New Zealand, maybe lunchtime on Saturday on Australia and New Zealand. But anyway, this is the aspect I want to talk about. And so the Sun-Neptune opposition is about confusion. The Sun is about ourself and how we express ourselves, and it's very much about the ego. It's about who we are, and I suppose to an extent where our boundaries lie. And then opposition Neptune is suggesting that something is maybe dissolving those boundaries. We're not quite so certain about ourselves, and there may be a sense that we don't always know who we are, and because the world out there is complicated, and the Neptune is a tide, it perhaps undermines our foundations. So that is certainly one way of looking at the Sun-Neptune opposition, perhaps in a fairly negative way. And we shouldn't forget, though, that the Sun is a male planet. So a woman with Sun opposition Neptune, that may not be about her, or entirely her. It may be perhaps about the men she's attracted to. It may be about her relationship to her father, not knowing too much about her father, or the men in her life being deceptive, being confusing, perhaps letting her down. And that is possible. So I think there is a general sense that Neptune is probably a malefic, more likely to be a malefic than a benefic. It's more Sun opposition Neptune is more likely to be a minus than a positive, than a minus than a plus. So all things being equal, and we also have to think about, what does Neptune mean? We have to look, Neptune. We have to look at its signification. Neptune can be about the sea. In Sun opposition Neptune, you can people who do have a relationship to the sea. It can be about drugs. It can be about poison. It can be about gas. It can be about all of these things. I suppose it can also be about music and about the collective and about perhaps transcending things. And in certain cases, it might be quite a spiritual opposition to have. It might allow us to move beyond who we are. Now, I do want to look at this Sun opposition Neptune in terms of a few examples. And I do think these examples do illustrate how the Sun opposition Neptune works. But as always, when I look at charts my charts, they're very particular to me, and it's an incredibly biased sample. So I must say this, it's just not representative necessarily of a wider population. But still, I do think these examples will perhaps help us understand what Sun opposition Neptune could be about. Now, Neptune can be literally about the sea. So the first chart is going to be of a sailor. And I've looked at this chart before. And this is a horoscope of Alexander Marinesco. And Alexander Marinesco was a submariner in the Soviet Navy in the Second World War. And he, in terms of tonnage, he was the most successful submarine commander Soviet submarine commander in the Second World War. And the reason he was so successful was because he sunk two huge ships right at the end of the Second World War. In fact, the worst maritime disaster was one of the ships he sunk was the Wilhelm Gustloff, which was a German ship that was moving across the Baltic. I think up to 10,000 people were killed by this by the torpedoes he fired. And so he has Sun opposition Neptune. In fact, I don't know his time of birth. He was born January the 15th, 1913 at noon in Odessa. And there's a Sun. You can see very close Sun-Neptune opposition. So you could say that he was actually using his Sun-Neptune opposition in the right way. He joined the Navy. Sun-Neptune opposition has a certain sense of deception. What is more deceptive than a submarine? And he was in the end he was a successful submarine commander. But at the time of his last mission, he was about to be court-martialed because he had an alcohol problem. He had a serious alcohol problem, and which basically ended his career. He wasn't recognized or decorated for this until the 1960s. He was in disgrace. He was. I mean, didn't go. He almost. I don't think he did go to prison, but he was. He was forced out of the Navy in difficult, in a very dishonourable way because of his alcohol issues, and so that's a reminder about what else Neptune can be about. It can be about alcohol, and it can be about misuse of alcohol. So I think that his Sun opposition Neptune doubly works well because of his links with the sea, and also the fact that he did have an alcohol problem. So another Russian who had a Sun opposition Neptune was Alexei Navalny. So Alexei Navalny, remember, he was the opposition leader in Russia who became very critical of Putin, and he had this video, this viral YouTube video where he was talking about Putin's palace and everything that he'd created for himself. And there is Navalny's Sun at 1314 Gemini. Oh wait, actually we do have his time of birth, 1:30 p.m. His Sun at 14 Gemini, pretty close to an opposition of Neptune at 1213 Sagittarius. And I suppose you could say that is Sun in Gemini. He has a lot to say for himself, criticizing Putin, but perhaps not being aware of what he's doing, perhaps losing control of it in his Sun-Venus conjunction opposition Neptune, perhaps moving into dangerous territory. Now, Neptune is also the planet of poison and gas, and as we know, there was an attempt on Alexei Navalny's life where he was flying in a plane, and he suddenly was taken ill, and he had been poisoned with, I think, Novichok, which is a nerve gas. And so Sun opposition Neptune just might indicate someone who is poisoned, is a victim of poisoning. And he was taken ill, and he was flew to Germany and got over it. But obviously, I assume his health was pretty smashed up by this encounter with Novichok. And Sun opposition Neptune, I suppose there's an idealism to Sun opposition Neptune. He clearly had some idealism, which perhaps went beyond common sense. So having recovered in Germany, he went straight back to Russia, and of course he was arrested and died in prison. And in his case, Sun opposition Neptune, perhaps there was a temptation to martyr himself. Going back to Russia was an act where going back to Russia after having been nearly killed, I suppose that could be one way in which one could see Sun opposition Neptune working. Now, if you've got Sun opposition Neptune, you might do things that were not expected of you, and you might be deceptive, and you might feel you have an obligation, a mission. So Edward Snowden, who leaked information about what the US government was doing, and remember he fled to, he had this journey, he fled to Hong Kong, and then in the end he went to Russia, and I think he's still in Russia. So he has the Sun opposition Neptune. There's his Sun in Gemini, opposition Neptune in Sagittarius. So that can work in several ways. Okay, Sun in Neptune, perhaps as a contract worker, is someone who leaks information. That's the kind of person he is, Sun opposition Neptune, at least if you want to be critical about him. But Sun opposition Neptune might also be, like we saw with Navalny, perhaps a sense of mission. He has something to do which goes beyond mere material concerns. Of course, he had no planets in Earth signs, so perhaps it wasn't money that motivated him. He felt he had to do something, and it was very important to him, and he didn't like what the American government was doing, so he felt he had no choice to leak information. And then of course he disappears, and his whole journey, and then turning up in Russia in the end, and staying in Russia. That may be how his Sun opposition Neptune is working. Now, Sun opposition Neptune can make you, I suppose, attracted to the media and bright lights. And Russell Brand, the sort of comedian and now social commentator, has Sun opposition Neptune, very sort of relatively close opposition to Sun and Neptune. So Russell Brand seems to be going on a permanent journey with Sun opposition Neptune. His idea, he clearly is someone who has strong sort of beliefs, and he sort of has transitioned to from someone who was sort of, I suppose, a sort of standard sort of left-wing comedian and commentator, but he seems to have moved in different directions. Sort of, perhaps he's been quite sort of influenced by various conspiracy theories, if you are a critic of him. But he's also, I suppose, being honest, and in terms of how he sees things, how he sees, for example, the Ukraine war, how he sees vaccinations, how he sees even the treatment of Donald Trump. So he seems to be on a constant journey, and maybe that's how his Sun Neptune opposition is working. And he's also sort of got himself into trouble. There were women accusing him of sexual misconduct, and I think as a result of that, he lost his YouTube channel. Didn't that right? Or got his YouTube channel demonetized. And so that Sun Neptune opposition that he has is potentially a little bit difficult. And then we've got his Black Moon Lilith is actually true. Black Moon Lilith is square his Neptune, square his Sun. So there may be a sort of darkness there to Russell Brand, and so perhaps he's not always aware of what he's doing, and perhaps that's how he's got himself into trouble sometimes. But I just feel that he does reflect that Sun opposition Neptune, and Sun opposition Neptune, I suppose, can tune into the popular mood, and I think that's something he's very good at, and perhaps that's why he's one of the reasons why he's been so successful. Tucker Carlson has Sun opposition Neptune, and So he has Sun in Taurus. I mean, on the surface, someone who's very solid, reliable. Okay, it might be Sun conjunct Algol. He actually is born on new moon in Taurus. So his new moon, in fact, he's got Neptune on the Sun-Moon midpoint. So Tucker Carlson is actually a very Neptunian person, and I think there's perhaps a link. You know, when you think about Russell Brand and Tucker Carlson, they both have Sun opposition Neptune, and I suppose both of them, perhaps to an extent, are attracted to conspiracy theories to an extent. Both of them feel that they should be very open about what they believe, and in the process they might be taking a little bit of a risk. Now, we actually can link that with Alexei Navalny. Of course, Alexei Navalny lost his life because he was open about what he believed in, but he had Sun opposition Neptune. So Sun may actually be about one's self-interest. If Tucker Carlson was only interested in himself and his bank account, he could just, I suppose, have just followed the party line and not rock the boat. But Neptune opposition the Sun may just encourage him to take things a bit further, and perhaps to be influenced by, you know, whatever else is going on around him in society, and just picking up on that. And I'm sure there's more to that Sun opposition Neptune in Tucker Carlson's chart than we see on the surface. I mean, I don't know a great deal about Tucker Carlson. Now, talking about the Sun-Neptune opposition in terms of psychology, there are two charts I want to look at, a father and daughter chart. And one of those charts is Paula Yates. So Paula Yates was a British TV personality. She was very into rock stars. She married Bob Geldof, and she then had a relationship with Michael Hutchins, and she in the end died of I think she died of a heroin overdose. And Paula Yates has the Sun opposition Neptune, and it was all of this. It does seem that with Paula Yates, she was kind of looking for something. I mean, she was certainly looking for she seemed to be looking for rock stars. So she would also sort of film. She used to have this TV show where she'd be sort of on a bed interviewing someone. For example, I think she was interviewing Michael Hutchins on a bed in a very sort of intimate kind of way, and that was her TV show. And I suppose at the time it was very successful. Sort of, when was that? Sort of, I think it was around the turn of the century, sort of around 2000 or something. I think she died. I think she's been dead a long time. But she has a Sun in the fourth house. And so what does that Sun opposition Neptune actually mean? So if you take modern Western astrology, sort of Liz Green, or, for example, or you could go back, William Lilly, how he did astrology, the fourth house is seen as the father. And I think it makes so much sense for the fourth house to be the father. The father is, the fourth house is more private from the 10th. The 10th house is the mother, and the fourth house is very secretive. It's the roots of who we are. And, fathers do not have to be around when children are born. The father can be dead when a child is born. Different with them. The mother certainly has to be around. The mother, that's why the mother, you can link the mother with the 10th house, because the child has most association with the mother rather than the father. But anyway, so with that Sun in the fourth house, opposition Neptune, there may be real father issues for her, and perhaps part of her problem, part of her quest for different rock stars may be about the search for her father. And the truth about who her father was came out very late in her life. And her supposed father was, was not her real father. Her true, her biological father was a man called Huey Green. So Huey Green, probably if you're not from the UK, or you're below a certain age, you might not have heard of Huey Green. But Huey Green was a major television star in the 60s and 70s. He had this show called Opportunity Knocks, which was a talent show. People would come on Opportunity Knocks and show off what they can do, and there'd be a panel, and the best act would be chosen, and it was a major thing, Opportunity Knocks, and Huey Green was a big star, and Huey Green was Paula Yates's father. I don't know his time of birth, and Huey Green has had a Sun-Neptune opposition in his chart, so there is a sort of a mystery to Sun opposition Neptune. Here is a man who fathered a child sort of anonymously, and then I think it was, I don't know quite when he died, I think it would have been after his death, that it became known, Paula Yates, became known that Huey Green was her father. And it's just interesting that both of them have Sun-Neptune oppositions in her chart. So Paula Yates has Sun-Neptune opposition. That says something about her father, and her true biological father did indeed have a Sun-Neptune opposition in his horoscope. Now, just a couple of events. I don't want to spend too long on events. You remember, was it last year when you had that former SS in Canada, in Ottawa, when you had that former SS, someone who'd served in the SS was applauded by the Canadian Parliament. So when that happened, the Sun was opposition Neptune. There was that was September 2023. Again, just actually almost exactly a year ago, the Sun was opposition Neptune, and the Moon was square the Sun, and the Moon was square Neptune. So in that case, you could see perhaps the Canadian Parliament being deceived, whether consciously or unconsciously, I don't know how it happened, into applauding someone who'd been in the SS, which was an extraordinary event. And as far as countries are concerned, this is a horoscope, or one of the horoscopes of Slovakia. When Slovakia became a nominally independent country, but it was a puppet of Nazi Germany. And there you have the Sun on the midheaven and opposition Neptune. So that's not a good start for a country, is it, having Sun opposition Neptune? A basic confusion about what the country is and where it's going, and could the country have really last for that long? I mean, you could say that was Slovakia's first taste of independence, but it wasn't really real independence. And of course, its leader at the time, in the end, was hanged. Joseph Tiso, remember, he was the priest, a conservative priest, who gave in to Hitler, and so that's an example of a country with Sun opposition Neptune. And then the Cultural Revolution, the day in which the Cultural Revolution started in China, the date seen is May the 16th, 1966. And there you can see that the Sun was reasonably close to an opposition of Neptune. There was a Mars-Neptune opposition. Sun was opposition Neptune. And so that's perhaps another side of Neptune. Neptune is about ideology. It's about the fantasy of ideology, getting excited about something which is perhaps beyond the ordinary individual. And so something gets unleashed. the tide of revolution, the tide of a cultural revolution, and as a result, historical artifacts get destroyed, people get wounded, maimed, executed, thrown out of windows, paralyzed. It was a terrible time, and of course the teachers are put on trial by their pupils, and so that's the inversion of the sort of a normal order. But that's Neptune just getting excited about it, and it's also May the 16th, 1966, and I suppose that may say something about the dark side of the 1960s. And we just looked at the Valentine's Day massacre. Valentine's Day massacre on February the 14th, 1929, and at the time of the Valentine's Day massacre, the Sun was making a wide opposition to Neptune. I suppose there was always a bit of confusion about the Valentine's Day massacre. We think that Al Capone was responsible, but no one's absolutely sure what happened, and maybe that Sun Neptune is kind of having a bit of an influence there. And finally, the final shot I want to look at, which has a Sun-Neptune opposition, was the first use of the gas chamber in the United States as a method of execution. And this was on February the 8th, 1924, I believe at 9:40 a.m. in Carson City, Nevada. And Neptune is the planet of gas, and it's a planet of poison. So I think that cyanide gas was used to execute the prisoner. And Sun in Aquarius, I suppose Aquarius is the new. Remember, people get excited about the sign Aquarius, but it's about technology and the misuse of technology, technology being used to control people, and in this case being used to execute people. And so you had Sun in Aquarius very closely opposition Neptune in Leo, and that just reminds us about what Neptune is about. It can be about poison, it can be about gas, and that just seems to fit the Sun-Neptune opposition extremely well. And that's it. That's all I'm going to say about Sun opposition Neptune. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did enjoy this video, I'd be very grateful if you were to like it. And if you're not subscribed and you did happen to enjoy this video, I'd be over the moon if you were to subscribe. And if you want to buy me a coffee, there is a link in the description. So thank you very much for listening, and I will talk to you again very soon.